Salutations readers, welcome back to the City Girl Writer channel. My name is Nkechi. Today's my birthday, and I'm actually giving y'all kind of like a list of books that I consider as required reading if you're here on my channel, City Girl Writer. Now, just to let y'all know, this is all fun and games. This is not like a restrictive, required reading list that you have to read these books in order to be a part of my channel. Completely unnecessary, especially if you're new here. Please, not necessary, alright? Even if you've been here for a little while. This is all just fun and games. I was actually just inspired to do this because of Hannah from A Clockwork Reader here on YouTube. And it was pretty much like a book recommendation video, just like a, kind of like a video just to like say like her kind of bookish taste. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. And especially when, hopefully when this video is up, it will be my birthday. So happy birthday to me. I'll be turning 22, and I decided, like, you know what? Let me show y'all the outfit I'll be wearing for my birthday. I have my emotional support Stitch right here. One day I will get a plushie, y'all. One day. Right now we'll just have him as a pillow. So yeah, I actually have about 22 books / series that I'll be showing y'all. But I will pretty much just go through the main list of books. I'm like, this is really my taste, and then I'll have some extra credits kind of thing. So yeah, I hope you all like this video. Alright, so let's get on to the list. So here's my stack here. We're gonna go through all the books, y'all, because I got a lot to talk about. So first up on the top here, I have Fullmetal Alchemist by Hiromu Arakawa. This is the manga series. I've actually finally read all the manga omnibus volumes last year. It was it's actually my favorite manga. Even though I don't really read a lot of manga, it is my favorite manga. I've loved it. I own all omnibus volumes, and I love these characters. I love the world. I love the themes, the topics, the messaging. And then another series that I love, not manga, but a novella series that I love is the Singing Hill Cycle. The first novella is The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. So every single novella installment here is pretty much its own thing. Pretty much it's like an entry point to the world where you follow the cleric Chi and Almost Brilliant, and they pretty much just go about in this world collecting stories. And honestly, I loved every single installment. I do have an arc for the 5th installment, so I should be reading that pretty soon. And yeah, I just always recommend this fantasy series. It's also very queer since the cleric Chi is non-binary, and we also just get also varying queer relationships. Especially this very first one is very much sapphic. So if you want something like a sapphic fantasy, I definitely recommend The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Niveau. Now let's go on to a different genre. Instead of some fantasy, let's actually go to more like a classic with Beloved by Toni Morrison. Literally my very first Toni Morrison, and it's literally the best one in my personal opinion. I did start off with the best. She's still great though. I still need to get through her catalog, but y'all, this one's very good. This is like historical lit fic, also a classic. It's also like a southern gothic tale where we follow a young woman named Setha who is living in this haunted house that is haunted by the ghost of a baby who died nameless, but whose tombstone is engraved with a single word, beloved. It is truly haunting, heartbreaking, but also has a little bit of heartwarmingness. There's some tenderness to it as well. And I truly loved Toni Morrison's prose in this. I mean, her prose is amazing in all her works, but this one in particular, chef's kiss. If you have not read Toni Morrison, I highly recommend Beloved. Just give it a shot. And I really need to do a reread and to properly annotate this as well. And while I don't really read a lot of romance, I have been reading a few, and there are a few romances that I've read that I actually really love that I now have on my shelf now. And first off, I have Honey and Spice by Bobu Balalola. I read this last summer, and I was genuinely surprised on how much I love this. This is a contemporary romance. It's a college romance as well with fake dating, and we're dealing with two black people who pretty much get in this fake dating situation because of social media things. But I also really like the way that these two handled that kind of situation, and the way that Bolu Babalola wrote their romantic relationship is so good. And also just even the side characters as well. It is filled with pop culture references, but I truly did not mind it at all. In fact, I actually appreciate the pop culture references, so I always just recommend at least giving this novel a shot. I tried the short story collection. I liked it. Didn't love it. The full-fledged novel, though, I really did love it. And I need Bolu Babalola to write another novel. She needs to hurry it up. Where's the next book? Please, let me know, okay? And now, this series. Y'all, this is the series that made me go, you know what? I really need to start my booktube channel. Okay, this is like OG kind of a book series for me at this channel because it is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, with the first book being Jade City. My very first video on this channel was me reviewing Jade City and Jade War. I love this urban fantasy, y'all. This gangster, Godfather-like series is just so good. It's so character-driven. It's a family saga, despite this being so action-packed, but also very political-heavy as well. Fonda Lee is just an auto-buy author for me. She's an auto-read, auto-buy. Like, I just have to read anything and everything that she has written since, like, the Greenbone Saga. So, I don't know. If you're here for morally great characters, really good written, well-written characters in general, with a very dense but also very interesting world regarding Jade and how that works with this island of this fictional world of fictional island of Kakon and these other countries, and how that works politically in the world. Like, if you want a whole family saga, Jade City, y'all, please take your time with it. It's also very violent, so definitely look up content warnings, but I recommend the Greenbone Saga hands down. And now this next book here is actually a recent favorite of mine from like last year's. It ended up being one of the best books that I read. And it was also a debut novel, and it was actually a horror novel as well, which I don't read a lot of, but I'm starting to get into. I'm talking about Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. And this is a lit fic horror book. It's also a grief horror book as well, with some very interesting body horror. It's also queer. And I'm just like, you know what? This book is really, really good. And also I do recommend the audiobook too. The audiobook production and the narration is also really, really good. So I definitely recommend it if you're an audiobook person. But I just really love the exploration of identity, but also this queer identity that's kind of subtle, honestly, but it's really, really good. And I really love the horror. The horror here, y'all, is really, really good. Gruesome, intense, kind of gory as well, but it's very good. And the lit fic side, especially with regarding the grief of the death of this boy here, and then seeing that how a piece of his lung got turned into like this monster thing named Monstrilio. Y'all, if you have not read this, please give this a shot. Please do. Okay? Okay. Now this book here, does it really need an introduction? It kind of does if you are new here. But honestly, this next book here is just an all-time favorite. It was one of my all-time favorite books from an all-time favorite author, and that is Freshwater by Nkechi Emezi. I read this like 2 years ago. I'm kind of due for a reread, honestly. And I've annotated, I don't know if y'all can tell, but I do have tabs here. I've annotated this thing. It was literally the first time I've ever come across a book that featured Igbo spirituality, and it taught me as someone who's Nigerian American that such reality even exists. I didn't even know you could be in a banje. I didn't even know what that meant. And just reading that in a book like Freshwater, it was so just eye-opening to the point that I need to reread it. It's definitely really emotional though. It's kind of also pretty sad, and it's also intense. But Nkechi Emezi's writing here, which is also their debut novel, it unlocks something in me, y'all. So please, if you have not tried anything by Nkechi Emezi, I do recommend Freshwater. I mean, if you do want to go for some sort of like context regarding what it means to be in bondage, I also do recommend their memoir, Dear Cerinthian, a Black Spirit memoir. But I do actually kind of recommend starting off with Freshwater first. And from one Nigerian author to another, I decided like, hey, let's talk about a classic Nigerian author, shall we? Let's talk about There Was a Country by Chinua Achebe. So this is actually his memoir, which is partially a memoir, but also a history account of the Biafran War of 1967 to 1970. And it talks about that war, what led up to it, and especially in like Chinua Achebe's perspective, because again, it's partially a memoir, and his perspective and what he gathered and learned, and as far as what led up to it and the aftermath and what was going on during. And it's it's kind of a lot. And I did want to get a physical copy to do a reread. And I definitely need to do a reread because I've learned so much about this war that is clearly impacting Nigeria currently, but also Nigerians that they also immigrate to other countries, especially like the United States. So it was definitely eye-opening for me and very much educational, personal for me. So that's why I'm like, you gotta read There Was a Country if you have not already, especially if you've read like Things Fall Apart. go if there was a country, okay? Now this book here, this next book, this is a book that honestly just like opened the door for me in regards to horror. I was like, wait a minute, there's a horror to have something like this? I didn't even know that. But honestly, I'm so glad that Sorrowland by River Solomon introduced me to it. So this is a gothic horror with some sci-fi speculative elements. It's also queer as well, where we follow I can't remember, I think 15, 16-year-old Vern, who gave birth to twins in a forest after she ran away from a cult. And honestly, this book truly introduced me to the fact that gothic horror and body horror and anything with plants, this is the kind of horror that like I love. I loved Sorrowland by River Solomon. I do also really recommend the audiobook production as well, because I listened to the audiobook. Definitely recommend. But y'all, this book, so good. Really well written. I really like the characters. I really loved the horror. I also like the theming and messaging as well. So yeah, if you've never heard about this book, please give it a shot. Take some time with it though, because it's also pretty intense. I think the author provided content warnings. Oh yes, there is indeed an author's note at the very beginning. So just so that y'all will know, the author does provide content warnings at the head of time. So if this is a little bit too intensive for you, that's okay. It is provided. So yeah, recommend Sorrowland. Now this series here, I also read, actually last year, I read both books because I was like, well, the last book in this series is out. I heard good things about it. Let me give it a shot. Only for it to end up being like a really good damn duology. And that is The Radiant Emperor duology by Shelley Parker Chan. The first book being She Who Became the Sun. The sequel being He Who Drowned the World. I loved He Who Drowned the World more than She Who Became the Sun. But honestly, I need to do a reread of She Who Became the Sun because I don't quite really recommend the audiobook. However, if you're here for like a sapphic fantasy with morally great characters and really interesting world building, and also with like a historical fantasy like The Radiant Emperor duology, which is actually just like a queer fantastical retelling of the rise of the Ming Dynasty. If you're here for that kind of adventure, I'd ever recommend She Who Became the Sun. Okay? Clearly, I need to do a reread, and I'm definitely doing it physically because iBook is not helping me. But I do recommend this series, and I truly love this sequel. Like, this duology has one of the best endings I've ever seen. It's just so good. So please read this if you have not already. Alright. These next two books here were actually the best books of the respective years that I have read them. And I think this next book here is actually no surprise as to why it's on the list. Babel, an Arcane History, or the longer title, we'll just say Babel for ease. Babel by R.F. Kuang. Y'all, I already have a dedicated reading vlog for this book when I started my channel late 2022. It's heavily annotated. Like, I really went through the ringer to annotate so much of this book. So please, I know it's very popular. I know probably a lot of you have already read it. But if you have yet to read this, please do not be super intimidated about the length and probably the synopsis and the kind of story it is. But just know that this is a historical speculative fiction novel, not so much on fantasy, because the fantasy elements in Babel is a lot lighter than the Poppyworth trilogy. So just come in here knowing that's more historical speculative fiction than like historical fantasy, like she would be like the Radiant Emperor duology. But I do recommend this standalone book here because I really like the amount of research that R. Kwang obviously put in here, especially regarding linguistics and translation and this commentary regarding colonialism and imperialism. Truly recommend Babel if you have not read it already. And the next book I have here was the best book of 2023, which I've already talked a lot about it, but I'll talk about it again because The Spirit Crusted Water by Sam Jimenez. Y'all, this book has still altered my brain. I'm still trying to think like what the best book of 2024 is even going to be, because like I don't know if the best book of 2024 I can even compare the best book of 2023. Okay, like this book has truly spoiled me. I do have a dedicated book review for this book, so if you have not checked out that video to know my full thoughts on this, I definitely recommend checking that first for sure to get more my thoughts and opinions and to know more about what this book is about. But y'all, I still love this. It's annotated, not as much annotated as Babel, but it is pretty annotated here. And I really do want to actually do a reread. I don't really recommend the audiobook. I know some people like the audiobook. I personally did not like the audiobook. It also has a missed opportunity of having more than one narrator. Read it with your eyeballs, okay? There's a lot going on, but honestly, take your time with it. It'll be worth it. I recommend. And then the next two books that I also have on my kind of required reading list here as like my main required reading list. I don't have them physically yet, but I do want to say that Unwieldy Creatures by Addie Tsai, which is a queer, biracial retelling of Frankenstein. That was really good, y'all. It's a horror, it's sci-fi, and I loved it. It was so good. I really like the direction that Addie Tsai went with this novel. And I wasn't quite sure on this ending, but honestly, after a while, I'm like, you know what? This is really good. This was actually a pretty solid ending, honestly, considering how the original ending went. So yeah, definitely recommend reading this. Especially if you're into Frankenstein retellings, check this one out, honestly. Please do. And then last but certainly not least, I have The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia. Oh man, I definitely need to get this book on my shelf because this is a short story collection. I read it via audio, and y'all, this is the first time I've ever read a short story collection where every single short story hit. There was not a single miss. Disha Filia just knew how to really write about Black women, Black girls in the church. Like, she did the thing, okay? If you're here for some really good lit fic contemporary short story collection about Black women and girls in the church, I recommend this. Truly do. Each story hits. Okay, my favorite story is still Peach Cobbler. Seriously, so good. And I really want to do a reread, but I need to get a physical copy ASAP whenever I find a copy of it anyways. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as like the main list. So let's actually start moving on into like the extra credit, shall we? Okay, so as far as extra credit, I don't really have a lot of books and series for this section, but also as far as the extra credit too, these aren't like books that I'm like, oh, these are like all-time favorites and stuff, like I will always highly recommend. This section is going to be more like, if this is really like kind of like up your alley, a little bit more specific kind of things, like these are like more my obscure books that are like, I really like, but I do know that not a lot of people will really would love as well. I mean, granted, you can definitely argue with like some of the books that I put in my required reading, but there's a little bit too much to that. If y'all don't like it, argue with the wall, okay? Not with me. But with these books, I'm like, look, I kind of see if you don't really like it, and I won't be upset if you didn't, but if you do like it, if you read it and you did like it, then you're a real trooper, okay? But anyways, let's start off with a young adult fantasy series that is not completed. I don't know when that fourth book is coming out, y'all. I need to know when this fourth book is coming out because I need to know what's going to happen in Insipidity Script series number 4, with the first book being Akata Witch by Nydia Okorafor. So this is pretty much a very young, some people might say upper middle grade. I would say it's just on the younger side of like young adult with like the 13, 14-year-old range, honestly, to pretty much like the older young adult. And this follows an albino Nigerian girl named Sunny who actually now moved to Nigeria. I think when she was young, she was born in the United States, but then moved to Nigeria, and she gets sucked into like this world where she finds out that she has magic. Honestly, I really did wish that I read this as a kid. It was a missed opportunity, but I am glad though I got a chance to read, pretty much be caught up to the entire series last year. Started off the series and caught up to the series last year. Like, I truly have really enjoyed each installment, but I really love the third book, Akata Woman. Next up is actually a series that like y'all already know I'm kind of a fan of if you've been here for a while. I even have like a theory video on the fourth and final book whenever that one comes out. But if you know it, y'all know, if you've been here, that is the Locked Tomb series by Tamsumiro, specifically with the first book being Gideon the Ninth, then we have Harrow, and then Nona. Harrow was actually my favorite installment so far. Even though I definitely enjoyed Nona, I still love Harrow, and I do need to do a reread of the series. But yeah, this is a very much of a mind-fucking kind of a series, honestly. It's very confusing. It's also convoluted, but it does make sense at like 75%. Once you get 75% of each of the installments, it starts adding up, honestly. And then it confuses you once you get to the epilogue. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, why it starts to add something, like throw a wrench into it for me. at the epilogue. I don't really appreciate it, but I'm also intrigued for the next book. You know what I'm saying? So clearly Tamsin Muir knows what she's doing. So yeah, this is definitely a book that like is so hard to recommend to people because there are a lot of people who have loved it, but there's also a lot of people who have not loved it or like, what is this book? I do not like it. And to be quite honest, you're valid in both ways. I'm just on the side that loved it. I don't know what side y'all are on, but I loved it. But yes, I definitely do recommend giving this a shot whenever you have the patience and time to read it. Now, this next book here, I actually really need to do a reread of to really solidify the spot for me. But based on what I remember from reading it in school, like in sophomore year of high school, I'm like, I had to put this on the list more so than this other book instead. And that is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. It's one of the shorter Shakespeare plays I've ever read for school. But this is the one that really stuck with me the most. And I don't quite remember why that is. Except for the fact that I remember learning how Macbeth himself is like a tragic hero. And learning about the tragic hero like archetype in high school was very, very fascinating. And seeing that in Macbeth was very, very fascinating. I do need to reread this play. But if any of y'all have read Macbeth recently, I would like to hear your thoughts on this play. As far as it holding up and stuff. But I think it would. I think I will really enjoy my time with Macbeth. So I do hope to reread it sometime this year and really go through it and annotate it and stuff and probably look up some analyses. But yeah, I just will recommend Macbeth as far as Shakespeare plays. I think this is one of his best, if not the best. It was the best for me out of the ones I've read, but I actually believe that it could actually be the best play he has written. Now this next book here, I definitely need to do a reread because when I first read it, I was like, it was a lot to take in, but it honestly was just so good that it was nearly a 5-star read for me. And that is Goliath by Tochio Onyebuchi. This is a sci-fi novel that's also dystopian as well. It's very futuristic. It's kind of like this biblical epic kind of story where we're following multiple characters. And it's kind of a little bit confusing as well. But the audiobook was really, really good. I do recommend the audiobook if any of y'all are into audiobooks. I recommend the audiobook for it, but I really need to do a reread of this. I don't quite remember too much about it, but I do remember really, really enjoying my time with this one and thinking that like this book has good reread potential. So I really need to actually just do a reread of this one, but I'm putting it on the list anyways for any of y'all who've read it recently and said like, yeah, this is really good. So yeah. And also Tochio Onyebuchi is just starting to become like a solidified auto read kind of author for me. I haven't read all of his works yet, but I have at least read all of his adult work. So whenever he publishes another adult work, I'm definitely there. All right. Now this other book here is actually a series that's starting to like really solidify to me that like I actually am really, really enjoying. I haven't finished this series yet, but I am gonna pretty soon as well. And I'm pretty much talking about the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick, starting with The Mask of Mirrors. And if y'all see my January wrap, I've already read The Liar's Knot. And, well, I do need to read Labyrinth's Heart. But yeah, this is a queer fantasy regarding multiple characters. It's also a pretty slow burn political fantasy as well. And it's just really, really fascinating to be following with a con artist named Ren. And pretty much just seeing like these multiple magic systems really overlapping each other with this politics of this world. It's kind of like inspired by like a Venetian inspired kind of world and stuff. It's very, very fascinating and I really, really like it. And I really need to read that third book. The Mask of Mirrors, this trilogy honestly is starting to become like a new favorite series for me, at least in 2024. So yeah. And it's the list. I know not a lot of people have read it, but please, if you have not, please give this a chance. I highly recommend the audiobooks because Nikki Masuda does a really, really good job narrating the characters with the accents and stuff, and especially in regards to the deception and the lies and the different masks that our main character has. Switching from all the accents makes it really easy to differentiate on like who's talking and which mask on who's talking as well. So definitely recommend this trilogy if you have not started reading this already. Now there's this other book here I don't have with me physically, but I do own the ebook, and that is Outdrawn by Deanna Gray. This is a book that I read in February, and it was a really, really good romance. It's a sapphic rivals to lovers romance, and it follows two black girls who are comic artists and this comic company. And honestly, it was just really, really good. I really liked the writing. I really liked the romance, honestly. I really liked how the rivals to lovers romance was handled and the pacing of it. And just their chemistry as well. It's just really, really worked for me. And I definitely recommend it if you have not read it already, especially if you're here for rivals to lovers. Like, just read it. Especially sapphic too. Highly recommend. Please read it if you have not already. And then now this last one, this is also like a extra credit as well, because I didn't really love every single book in this series. However, I do want to at least own most of the books in this series. And as the Mead Mishap series by Kimberly Lemming. I only love the first and third book. I did not love that second book. You can watch my Blackathon wrap-up video for that one. But I really did have a really good time with this one. And I was really surprised by it too. I didn't think I would, since it's a fantasy romance and it has really high explicit sexual content, but I genuinely really did have a good time with this series. And I have to thank Heather from here Booktubes. She specifically recommended me That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and honestly, I really, really had a good time with it. Didn't love the second book, but I also did have a good time with the third book, so it's all good and dandy for me. I never recommend giving this series a shot if you want to, but do know though that 2 out of the 3 books, maybe a little bit on the third, but mostly on the first 2 at least, the author does have content warnings regarding light BDSM and also dubious consent. So if that's kind of content that you do not want to read in your romances, I just want to let y'all know that's there. The author does provide content warnings in each installment, but just something to look out for and to keep in mind with if you want to read this series. But yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. This is pretty much my extra credit here. So these are books that, like, I know not everyone will like, and you're not like my all-time favorites, but like these are books I did enjoy, and that if you enjoyed it too, I do recommend, y'all and I have pretty similar tastes. And if not, maybe check out these kind of books. It would help if y'all can actually see the spines, but y'all know what I'm trying to do, right? Alright, y'all. Well, that is pretty much it. That's all the books that I have for y'all as far as what I put on my required reading list, along with some extra credit for my birthday, honestly. So yeah, if any of these books you have read and y'all loved as well as much as I have, then we have pretty similar tastes. So I do have 22 books/series because I just lumped the series together into one. Let me know in the comments, if you made it this far anyways, like how many of the books and series have y'all read and really loved? Like, and by like love or really like, I mean like you gave it like a 4 higher or something. I want to know how similar our tastes are. But yeah, please, just let me know in the comments. I'm just kind of curious if any of y'all who watch me have similar bookish tastes as me. If not, that's okay. If you made it this far into the video, please put down a green heart emoji, because green is my favorite color. Anyways, thank you all for coming on to this video, and I hope to see you on my next one. Bye.